Danse Anin, bonjour, welcome, good afternoon. My name is Dennis Ward. I'm a host producer at APTN News. I'm a Red River Métis, born and raised in various communities here in southern Manitoba. Host producer for APTN National News as well as Face to Face. See at least one former guest here up front. Hey, Mark. So I'm the moderator here today. I'll introduce you to our panelists. First up, all the way down to your right is Cheryl McKenzie, an Anishinaabe and Cree woman from Hollow Water and Peguis First Nations in Manitoba. Cheryl joined APTN as a reporter in 2001, and she's gone on to play a key role in the launch of APTN National News, APTN Investigates, In Focus, pretty much any show that airs for news and current affairs. Cheryl's been a part of that. She has thousands of hours easily of television to her credit and has been nominated for numerous awards, and including a Gemini. Just last year, she was honored by NAJA with a Medill Milestone Achievement Award. She's also mentored and helped train countless journalists. Next up is Angel Moore, who is Cree and also from Peguis First Nation in Manitoba. Angel grew up here in Winnipeg and has a journalism degree from the University of King's College. She also has a degree from Dalhousie in International Development Studies and Environmental Sustainability. Angel joined APTN News in June of unknown year, according to my notes. I missed that somehow. June of 2018 as the correspondent in the Halifax Bureau. She's also, of course, still on the NAJA board, or yes, the Indigenous Journalism Association's Board of Directors. And last but certainly not least, Rick Harp, a proud member of the Peter Ballantine Cree Nation in northern Saskatchewan. Rick has 25 plus years of broadcasting and communications experience, including on-air roles with APTN, NCI, and CBC Radio. An avid podcaster who in 2016 launched the program Media Indigena, which many people would probably know. And he now hosts and produces the APTN News Brief. So just a few years ago, APTN celebrated a milestone, its 20th anniversary, just 3 years ago now. And so I figured we'd play you a little video story we put together back then that kind of encapsulates the first 20 years of APTN News. And this was voiced by Brittany Hobson, who's now in the crowd too.
April 16, 2000 marked a new day for Canadian broadcast journalism. APTN aired its first ever national news program called Envision.
Our purpose, telling the stories of our people from the perspective of our people. Since television news first began many years ago, the mainstream media has tended to focus mainly on negative stories when talking about our people. The truth hasn't been reflected until now. It's been just over a year since the official birth of Nunavut, but it was last Thursday at a special ceremony in Ottawa that the new territory's coat of arms was unveiled. APTN was there.
It was the first time a national newscast was dedicated to sharing the stories of Indigenous peoples across Canada, and it was put together by an Indigenous television crew. Bruce Spence is a current producer with APTN National News. He's been with the team since the beginning and recalls the weeks leading up to the launch.
There was a lot of excitement in the air. There was a lot of anxiety in the air as well, because it had never been done before.
The team had to start from scratch, beginning with constructing a television studio at the world headquarters in Winnipeg. After months of meticulous preparation, Envision was ready to debut.
We had a few guests come into the newsroom to watch the show go to air, and there was a lot of hooting and hollering and cheering and backslapping, for that it was a triumphant moment to get that show on the air.
Around the same time, APTN also launched its weekly call-in show called Contact.
Welcome to Contact, the current affairs program of the Aboriginal Peoples Television Network. I'm your host, Rick Harp. On today's program, we're looking at freedom of the Aboriginal media.
The show aimed to dig deeper into timely topics such as traditions, the 60s scoop, and the environment, even taking its show on the road to Yellowknife.
It's going to be like an adrenaline rush unlike any other Contact studio show that we've done.
From the beginning, APTN has strived to tell stories others won't. Whether that's reports of starlight tours or missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, truths important to Indigenous peoples. Francine Compton began her career at APTN News when she was 19 years old. Over the years, she has taken on many roles and is now the executive producer for the national news program. She remembers news hustling every day, but it would be a while before others paid attention.
We were on the block for, I want to say, at least a decade before starting to have our issues be noticed, before starting to see our issues lead the top story on other mainstream national news networks.
Then she started cutting his hair. And he said, I was so scared.
In 2009, APTN Investigates was born. It was the first Indigenous investigative news program in Canada. Slowly but surely, mainstream media took notice. But Compton says the pivotal moment came in 2012.
I believe Idle No More really was a catalyst in changing that, and having other journalists and outlets wake up and say, what's going on here? Why are the people making these movements? And look at APTN and what they're asking and how they're covering it.
2 years later, APTN News expanded its programming with the introduction of Nation to Nation, Face to Face, and Laughing Drum. Reporters continued to cover important topics such as Standing Rock or water and housing issues on Indigenous land. Current news director Cheryl McKenzie credits the APTN News team for this.
We really value people's perspectives, journalists' perspectives from across the country. That's really how we know what's happening across the country, is based on what the reporters and video journalists are telling us. So we give people a lot of editorial freedom that you would not get in other national networks.
For the past several years, reporters and stories have been recognized with various awards. However, the best reward has been staying true to what the team set out to do 2 decades ago.
My special moments at APTN are when we serve our people and they are proud of us and they feel that we've done a service for them.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News.
So thanks for that, Britt. It's a good report and kind of sums up those first 20 years into 4 minutes. So 23 years later, we still have daily newscasts 6 days a week, current affairs and other programs like APTN Investigates, In Focus, Face to Face, and Nation to Nation, and continue to produce major events like elections, most recently the North American Indigenous Games. And on top of that, there's also a partnership with Rogers to do Hockey Night and in Cree, which our studio crew does that. I just have a little opening here so you can kind of see what that all sounds like. If I had audio. So as somebody who knows like 10 Cree words, it's still pretty exciting to hear this no matter what, even if you don't understand what exactly is being said. And I have in my notes, I don't know if this is true, but the first Hockey Night in Cree game is the most watched single program in APTN history, according to Derek Christianson. Anyways, so I guess if we want to just say whatever one we think, but I mean, it is pretty successful. So we'll go to some of our panelists here, and Cheryl, we'll maybe start with you on some of your memories of those early days of the APTN launch and kind of the evolution of APTN News.
Yeah, of course, I joined APTN 1 year after the launch, and at the time, we were doing the news twice a week, so we'd have to rush back and get our deadline for the very next day or the day after. So it's like very different to what we do today, doing the 6 days a week, plus our current affairs shows, and just full-time investigative reports, online news reports, and there's several APTNers here or past APTNers here who know what it's like these days, and the crew, Sandra Seidel, sitting out there is a key part of what of our production. And of course Ken Welsh, who we were trying to get up on the stage here too, because he is the one of the guys who built APTN and APTN News. So I really wish that he would not be so shy and come up here and share some of his stories. He has so many. But when I first joined, I was very new to reporting. I just came from an internship from CBC. And then it started off as a 3-month internship, and then it got extended a couple times, and then at 9 months, they gave me a bracelet and a cake and said, okay, bye-bye now. Okay, all right, so I literally walked down the street and knocked on the door, and I asked to talk to Dan David, and I talked to Bruce Spence, and he's like, oh, well, I don't know. So I wish he was here too. And then so the next day, Dan called me and said, well, let's have breakfast. And so we had a breakfast interview. And then the next day he just went, okay, there you go. There's your desk. Get started. And I was like, wow, it's a computer there and a phone, and that was about it. And so I really had a big learning curve, and I really learned a lot from Rick, because Rick is the one who was there and really leading the editorial and was really smart about things. And I remember when one of our news director, after Dan David left, and news director Rita Deverell came along, and she'd call him Dr. Harp. Because he's just so smart, and has lots of ideas on how we should be covering things. So I really learned a lot from Rick and the other reporters, and of course Karen Pugliese, who is also out in the audience, who was our Ottawa correspondent at the time. So it was a really big learning curve, but it was really gratifying to be able to come from the environment of where I started off at CBC. I might as well just name them. I wasn't gonna say names, but might as well say them. But because I came from university, and then I got that internship at CBC, and so I was writing big, massive, long sentences, and of course, that doesn't work in broadcast. So I remember them going through my scripts and putting a big square around a whole paragraph and marking an X on it. It's and just kept on going along until I came, 3 lines, okay. And so when I got to APTN, we could write it the way we wanted, and it would get, it could change. And of course, everything's factually correct. But I remember doing my stand-up and feeling so good about it at the end. I just wanted to, put my hand out, we can word things the way that we know are true, and it's not going to get cut and heavily edited. So that's some of my earlier memories that I really enjoyed. And it took a long time, because television broadcasting, we're on, the tapes, SP and SX tapes, and so I go to the edit suite and I have like 7 tapes carrying to go and do my 3-minute news story, and it would just take forever to edit, and I'd be asking for more time, and so it took a long time to figure out, to be more focused and not go into the edit suite with 8 tapes to do a news story. So also, that's why I wish Sandra was up here too, because we didn't have what do you call that? Like a gateway system, a file sharing system. So in order to get the stories to air from our correspondents across the country, they put their tapes, do a paper edit, and put all the edit notes and time codes for the tapes, and then put them in a FedEx box and send them to Winnipeg. And then they would get edited in Winnipeg and then broadcast on our Envision newscast. So we always joke around, this newscast brought to you by FedEx. Literally. So it was really, really lots of stuff back in the day. We're all crammed in this newsroom, and the guys are in the control room, and women in the control room, and hanging out in the hallway like all day. And of course, everyone's going back and forth, but we have a lot more space now. We have a beautiful newsroom now, and hopefully that stays going well. But those early days, they were really lots of fun and very gratifying, just to be able to say it like it is, and you're given the freedom to do that. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
I love the story of having to ship the tapes from one hit story to air 7 days later or so once it finally made it there. Rick, like we mentioned, you were there in the early days. You've been back a few times, back again.
Yeah, they can't
maybe
get
a
rid of
little
me.
on those early days and what keeps you coming back.
Oh yeah, don't put me on the spot. Thank you. APTN, like, it was just a dream scenario. I think something that's not widely known is that no one was more surprised that they got the license than the people who put the license proposal forth. It was a real shock. I mean, don't get me wrong, the proposal was thorough, it was thought through, but just given, the CRTC grants licenses in this country, it's like the FCC in the States, and there was no guarantee it was going to go through. So it's one of those things that was a quite thrilling origin story, because all of a sudden you had to create this network from nothing. And I mean, that's not entirely true. I mean, a lot of the proponents were from up north, and so there was that critical mass of skills, but it was going to be based in the south, although where was also a question. Was it going to be in Ottawa or Winnipeg? And I was living in Ottawa at the time when they decided to locate here, so it brought me back, for better or for worse. And anyway, my recollections of the early days was just how green we all were, and we were obviously brought on for a reason. We all had abilities, but they were in other fields. So Bruce Spence, he cut his teeth in print, right? I was in radio. We even had a dramaturge, Ken Williams, hired on. So in some ways, it was taking people from out of their comfort zones and putting them into a different medium. But I mean, of course, storytelling is storytelling. But it was green on both sides of the camera. Jim Compton had mentioned a couple days ago, I think, about there was a local training program and there was a cohort, and pretty much all of them came over. So it was pretty wild. So we were all kind of in the same boat, and I think that was ultimately to the good, because we're all growing together. And yeah, Cheryl was saying the editorial freedom, for better or for worse, like kind of learning on the job, and our errors would be painful. Sometimes, but sometimes it'd be exhilarating too. And I was brought in as the host of Contact, which was a live call-in show. I only later became a co-anchor with Nola Wetany of the APTN National News. And we were talking about things that still are being discussed today. I remember we did a show called What's with Wannabes, which now called Pretendians, but we were talking about that back in the early 2000s. And talked about should women drum. That was a fun show to do, and should we powwow for money. So and I think these kinds of topics. I remember people over at CBC going, "That's really interesting." That never occurred to me. So, but I think the big hurdle we crossed is when we had to go live. Contact had to go live, and we were kind of, because it's a live call-in show, right? But the news got to pre-record, and the big threshold was when yep, we're gonna go live. What are you talking about live? Like everyone was just freaking out. And it's like, not only are we going live, we're gonna go 5 days a week. Remember that? It was just like, oh man, it was awesome. Just. But we did it. It's like, well, first of all, it's 24 minutes, right? It's not the full. And so you start breaking it up. We could do the weather, right? So, so when you really break it down, it's like 5 stories, So anyway, and there's a lot of people that have come through the doors, come back through the doors. So it's a very interesting place, and I'd love to see an oral history done of APTN National News, but also APTN as a whole. So. Yeah, that's enough for me.
I believe there is a book that came out a few years back on the history. But yeah, it certainly needs an updating. Angel, you're one of the newer reporters, although you've been here for 5 years. But did you know that you wanted to come and work at APTN News, and what keeps you with the company?
No, I did not. I did not. I was trained as a writer and editor, and had no clue I would be in television at all. I remember. Can you guys hear me? Okay? Yeah. I remember my my interview, and I said, I kind of gave all the reasons why I would not be good for the job, and thank God I hired me. And I said, I had no plans to work on television. I don't want to be on camera. And during the interview, they said, "Oh no, it'll just be your voiceover. You'll never be on camera." And a week later, I was like, "Hi, I'm Angel Moore," in front of the camera. No, it never occurred to me. It was suggested that I applied, and there was an opening, and I think a lot of it is luck, right? Being at the right place at the right time. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't. I interned at CBC for a month when I was in school. I didn't fit there at all, and so I wouldn't change anything. And what keeps me with the company is you guys both talked about the editorial freedom, that we tell stories our way, for our people, and that trust that you guys built up have made my job wonderful. So thank you very much for building the trust of the company, and that means that keeps me there, and that really has a lot of heavy clout, I think, with people in the community, that it's APTN and it's Indigenous news, 1,000% Indigenous news, and we have our own editorial freedom. So, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Thank you.
Angel, while we're with you, maybe and move into some of the big issues, the big stories. From what I understand, being out on the West Coast, people or East Coast, people are still talking about stories and coverage that APTN did two decades ago.
Yeah, that was, of course, Burnt Church, which a lot of you were reporters there on the ground at the time, and that was right when the Donald Marshall decision happened, which most of you probably know the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that the Mi'kmaq have a right to harvest food for a moderate livelihood and sustenance, and basically upholding the treaties, which is very cool because we all say we have treaty rights and Aboriginal rights, but to actually see it today being implemented and upheld and challenged, so that story from 20 years ago has carried through and is the same issues, and it's the same story going on today, literally, and it's the same people and it's the same families, and yeah.
Cheryl,
can I just? I mean, Burnt Church was really, really exciting because, we had people on the ground. We had somebody knowledgeable there, Maureen Gugu, Mi'kmaq herself. But what was also an interesting aspect of that for me was kind of prefiguring, or I don't know what the right word is, but there was citizen footage, very dramatic footage of a boat being rammed by a DFO boat, I believe. And so this was shot on one of those handy prosumer cameras and whatnot. And I think, now it's just taken for granted. People are videotaping, or not videotaping, sorry, filming, using their phones and whatnot. But back then, it was still pretty rare for somebody to be literally there on the spot. And we got that footage. I think we got privileged access to it initially. And so it just gave this immediacy, this intimacy, but also this connection with community that, like I say, kind of prefigures where things have gone now. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a story, this is still going on, and just last week, Angel had a story where she happened to be there when some non-Indigenous fishers came over to a Mi'kmaq boat and just took the lobsters right out and took off, and Angel had that all on camera, which was pretty crazy. Cheryl, thoughts for yourself on some of the big stories that you can remember?
I think I really liked our coverage of Elsie Booktook out on the East Coast when they are exploring for shale gas deposits, and the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet people there protesting, protecting their lands from this encroachment. And that's where Ozzie Michelin, another former APTNer, he was there on the ground and snapped that now iconic photo of Amanda Polchis holding a feather and a wall of police in their riot gear trying to push everyone back. And so she went down on her knees with the feather, and there were others. If you see the footage that you can watch on APTN National News someday, there's other women who joined her holding up a feather. And I thought that was just really, really moving, because they holding them back, but the police were advancing. They had snipers in camouflage with rifles, and then there's a picture. I don't know if it's for real or not. There's a Mi'kmaq guy standing next to the guy at the sniper in the grass, but we have a photo of that, and I'm pretty sure it's real. But just the lengths that Canada goes to let industry run its course when Indigenous peoples are standing up and not wanting that to happen and wanting to protect their lands. So I think that was a big story. Also, and Karen will remember this, because the police cars in and around Rexton, New Brunswick, and they got torched. There was a bunch of RCMP cars. We have footage of those just torched, like on fire, blazing, like a row of cars just absolutely torched. And so the RCMP were trying to get our raw footage of the Rexton there. So I guess they wanted to see who's torching their vehicles. And of course, as a matter of principle, we're never just going to give up our tape, absolutely, and absolutely not raw tape. We're going to fight to not give that up, especially to the RCMP. They have to go through the courts to try and force us to do that. So Karen gave me a copy of that disc, I remember, and I hid it in my cubicle wall. I think we were going a little bit too far, but at the time it seemed like, we gotta trust that. Yeah. Yeah, so we hid it there, and I don't know, they never did subpoena for it because we broadcast it all. So you can go ahead and look in our archives to see if you can pinpoint the guy that or the people who torched the vehicles. But yeah, as a matter of principle, we will not give up our footage. And actually, Angel's footage that we just referenced, the RCMP do want that footage, and they're going to have to go through due process. Even though it was a crime against a Mi'kmaq fisher, we can't just give it up as a matter of principle. So that one's ongoing. But anyway, that's just another big story, I thought.
The music's starting, so you have to stop talking.
The story that we had watched there Francine had mentioned the impact of Idle No More and that kind of being a turning point of some sorts. Rick, you've literally done documentaries on this. Do you want to speak about the importance of that?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, I wasn't working at APTN at the time. I was at CBC in Edmonton, and I remember being there on the street seeing one of the big rallies. I think it was the December 10th rally back in 2012. But I was approached by previous ED Karen Pugliese, who's over there, and Tim Fontaine and I, who now makes a living as an unserious journalist, but with Walking Eagle News, we dug into the deep archives of APTN National News. I think arguably APTN News, that was a major turning point for it. It knew a good story when it saw one, and it was the first to grasp the potential of Idle No More, although it was literally in the streets, right? Like, but you saw what was going on and saw the import of it, and so reporters all across the country, and like I say, we had this incredible archive. That was what Karen asked us to do, was to make documentaries out of the archives, which are rich and deep, although all frustratingly on tape, and there's a big room full of them, and so we had to go through them all, and it was an incredible moment, I think, of mutual self-awareness, if that makes sense. Indigenous people seeing themselves in a new light, being seen differently by Canadians. This has also coincided with the hearings of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So it was a heady time, and we were able to capture that in the documentary. It's called The Power Was With Us, Idle No More. Available only on APTN Lumi in Canada. We're working on that for the States, right? Which is our Netflix.
You can get a free subscription on APTN Lumi.
There you go. LUMI. And yeah, I think APTN, it catalyzed the network. It's web. It also on the web, right? Like, it was also, I think, its maturation on the web. Like, when I was, I'd left APTN in 2005. It was dabbling in the web, but by the time 2012 came around, Facebook, Twitter, and the like, blogs, YouTube, all these tools had gotten to a certain threshold, inflection point, and APTN was able to take advantage of that. And so mainstream news, I think, paid more attention to APTN. People in general paid more attention to APTN, and I think it really elevated the network and the news department specifically.
Angel, any stories that stick out for you, whether you did them or before you started or since you started?
That I've done
or that you've
both?
just seen?
Yeah, of course, Idle No More, Oka, Wet'suwet'en, stuck out for me of my existence. Mainly in my area, it's the treaties and the Aboriginal title, because the territory I cover is quite a fair bit. So it's I would say the stories that stick out obviously are the ones that have the most impact. Everybody knows of the fishery, and that's more so famous. But there's other stories that stick out that community members have come to me because I'm with APTN, or because of me, but because of APTN. Stories that mainstream media does not cover. That like the stories I did a few stories about the woman that passed away in a Cape Breton hospital. She was a Mi'kmaq lady, and the profound neglect and by the hospital staff, and the records, the lack of records, the destroying of records. So I guess the stories that have the personal, that touch your heart, kind of, and hopefully and do make a difference. But sometimes we do stories and they do make a difference, but you kind of you see it, but in the long run, when it affects people's lives in the long run, which is really awesome. Yeah. And I always love going on a lobster boat, that's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding.
My monopod filming.
Yeah, I can't get over that because Angel is a video journalist. You know, if Angel stands up, you'll see like how tiny Angel is. You know, she's carrying this camera on a lobster boat, staying on the boat overnight. And I look at that footage and I see it going up and down and up and down. And there's Angel. Oh yeah, acting like nothing, just on the boat there. Just amazing the work that Angel does as a VJ all by herself out in Halifax.
Yeah, feels like sometimes we do the same story over and over and it gets no traction and no change, but one that certainly sticks out for me, and that's where I first met Rick. You weren't with APTN at the time, but Shoal Lake 40, where the city of Winnipeg gets its clean drinking water from Shoal Lake 40. But cheers to that. But in order for us to get their water, they were turned into a man-made island in order to run the aqueduct from Shoal Lake to here. So they went 24 years without clean water themselves, and a century without being able to get off the island without a barge or crossing the ice in the winter. And just recently, they got a full Freedom Road, year-round access, which has allowed them to get a new water treatment plant and have clean water and get a new school. And that was a century's worth of work, but it feels good when you know that you had. There's no doubt that there was an impact in the coverage that APTN and others did in that fight. I don't know, Rick, if you have any reflections on Shoal Lake 40. You were pretty active in that outside of the media.
Well, it feels kind of weird to talk about that, right? Because in a sense, I was not acting like a quote-unquote dispassionate journalist. I had no idea that this First Nation that lived literally beside Shoal Lake, 100 kilometers away, that, through this incredible aqueduct, like a huge engineering feat. It's almost like one of the wonders of the world, but it literally took away access for the First Nation to drinking water. And I saw something on TV, a minister or maybe the MP for the area was just completely disregarding some of the local folks, and it was just, I was outraged. And so did this kind of stunt to, because the federal government under Harper, Stephen Harper at the time, a conservative government, there was supposed to be a tripartite funding arrangement. The city, the province, and the feds were supposed to fund $10 million each, the construction of a road that would then enable the creation of a treatment plant. And so the federal government said, yeah, we're not going to do that. And so I saw this heartbreaking footage of a father and his daughter being ignored by an MP from the area, and I was just outraged, and so I undertook this stunt to fundraise the other $10 million on a crowdfunding site. And it was really just to raise awareness. So I'm kind of sheepish about it because, I still have that ethos of, I'm not supposed to be part of the story, but I wasn't working at APTN at the time, so I guess it doesn't count. But at the same time, journalists take up causes all the time, right? I used to work at CBC, and they would fundraise for a food bank. I think food banks should not exist. I think they're an affront to human decency, and it's grotesque that they make a tradition every year out of basically saying, we let people starve. So, there's a bias in action as well. So, at least that's how I square it in my own little mind. But so people fundraise for cancer treatment. And so I just feel like we were talking about Truth and Reconciliation. It was quite, its report was fresh, and I just thought Winnipeg needs to make right with the people who live at the source of its water. So it didn't necessarily feel like it was, like I wasn't running for a party or anything like that. I was just feeling like, as one of thousands of Indigenous people in the city, we should do right by our relatives and who live at the source of our water. So all that to say, I'm glad it made a good impression on you there.
Vote Rick Harper.
Yeah, that's right.
Decent human
That's
being.
right. That's right. You have until 10 o'clock tonight to vote. Okay.
I don't know if there were going to be questions or not. If we should leave, we'll certainly leave time for that. I guess I have this video of Standing Rock up. For me, that was obviously a big moment. I spent the better part of 2 months over a period of 8 months down there, and my cameraman and I, Damien, every time we seemed to go down there, there was something crazy would always go on. We did a couple documentaries, and I'll just play a little of one of them here now, I guess.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran. Tonight on APTN Investigates, we look at the showdown at Standing Rock. Thousands have made the journey, some from around the world, to join the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline. But months of prayer and protest have only been met with pushback from police and politicians. And the election of Donald Trump has only fanned fears over DAPL and other pipeline projects. Dennis Ward was on the ground for the biggest clash at Standing Rock, one that saw water protectors hurt, pepper sprayed, tasered, and shot at with rubber bullets.
Move to the south. Go back to the south camp.
This is Sioux Nation land. Who has water? Shoot at it!
This confrontation comes after months of protests. They were mostly peaceful and full of prayer. Hundreds of tribes and thousands of people from across the globe came to Standing Rock to show support, to stop the oil, the so-called Black Snake, from crossing the Missouri River.
This is 7 council fires, Ocheti Shakoi.
Joy Braun was one of the first people to form the Sacred Stone Camp, answering the call from her relatives.
My base camp has been here since April 1st when there was still snow on the ground.
This overflow camp, known as Ocheti Shakoi, or the...
Unfortunately, we lost Joy a few months back. A lot of the people who played a major role in the start of Standing Rock are now no longer with us, but I see Crystal's in the back. Sorry, Crystal, I should have given you a trigger warning. I know watching some of those things, even for myself, take you back there. But huge thanks to Karen, who also saw the importance of this story, and we had reporters trading off going down there for a good chunk of the 7 months that it went on. Something that I'll never forget anyways. I don't know how much time we have left here. I did want, Cheryl, for you to maybe touch on, Willow was here earlier. I know she has to take a flight, but Willow Fiddler, who was once with APTN, now with the Globe and Mail. Brittany Hobson's here, once with APTN, now with the Canadian Press. Karen, who's all over the place. This conference has been full of people that either they're with APTN now or they were at one point, and maybe if you want to talk about the impact that the network has on training journalists to go out into the mainstream and the impact that that has.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, and that's from our very first father of APTN News, Dan David. He came in with the understanding that, there are so few Indigenous journalists out there at the time when it started that APTN News needs to be a place where we grow Indigenous journalists, and he called them, and then they would be the Ebola to go out into the mainstream and work in the areas and have influence over all those different newsrooms that didn't have Indigenous voices in there. Like there's Rosanna Deerchild, you see here, Stephanie Scott. There's so many. No. Oh, Angel is saying Duncan McHugh and say, no, not Duncan. Duncan is never persuaded Duncan to join APTN, no. But APTN really is a place where people can come get experience, and the experience that people get at APTN, if they show real promise, they get big opportunities. Like you can be an intern showing promise, and a month later you're hosting our national news program. And so we really try to give people the opportunity and experience to do what they want and where their interests are. And of course, the opportunities come up, and then people go, and so we need to bring more people in and train people. And I see Trevor at the back of the room there. He's our new Iqaluit video journalist, and he's has a print background, so he's new to video journalism. But he was already having some something happened with the technology and it broke down, but he was able to get a perp coming out of the court there, and we were able to broadcast it on the news. And so that's thank you, Trevor, for joining APTN way up in Iqaluit there. But Crystal Green also was an intern with us at APTN, and I'm still trying to find a way to bring Crystal back into APTN also. And so we just really want to train Indigenous journalists and bring them up, because there aren't nearly enough qualified Indigenous people for the jobs. Because we post jobs, and occasionally we do hire non-Indigenous people, and it's not because we're hiring them over an Indigenous person. It just the way the recruitment went, and we didn't get the Indigenous candidates that we hoped for. So definitely our focus is on bringing in Indigenous journalists and trying to hold on to the ones that do great work, like Rob Smith, who's also in the Frontier. Rob Smith is our video journalist in Vancouver. He's investigative video journalist, and he's been doing this work since before APTN even existed. And so I really learned a lot from Rob, and thank him for his contributions to APTN News.
Yeah, personally, I always used to get so bummed out when we'd lose people, but now I come to that realization, that there's now people that are in the halls of Global News and the public broadcaster and the Globe and Mail, Canadian Press, everywhere, and just how important it is to have people taking up those spaces too. So we do have a little bit of time still. If anybody had any questions, this mic up front is live. If you have anything you want to say, here we go.
Said hello to you yet. So my name's Shannon Avison, and I work at the First Nations University of Canada, and I teach in a little program that's getting bigger called Indigenous Communication Arts, and I teach a class called Indigenous Media in Canada. And in 1998, I knew that there was this proposal. The TVNC board was putting a proposal forward to the CRTC. And so I actually got my students to write letters of intervention for the original license of APTN in September 1999, went on the air. And I actually ran into a student a little while ago, and she told me that she was in that class in 1998, and she was watching APTN, a children's show, with her little granddaughter, and that she told her little granddaughter that she was one of the people responsible for getting APTN on the air. So that was really special. In the early 2000s, I actually brought a group to the APTN studio in Winnipeg, and it just by accident, it was the very first episode of Contact and the call-in show. And so everybody was super excited, and there we were in the newsroom and meeting Bruce and meeting everybody. And nobody knew for sure. It had been marketed and promoted, but nobody knew for sure like who was going to call in and who would be aware. So we were in the other room, and they said, I think Bruce said, if nobody calls, call. And so we ended up calling from the other room, and we were from Saskatoon, John Legendary from Saskatoon.
That's not supposed to, yeah, come on.
Darren Deschambault from Deschambault Lake, Saskatchewan, and Joan Ireland from London, Ontario. So that was fun. So that was really fun to be part of that. And then, of course, once we triggered that, everybody started calling in. So that was super fun. And then we actually brought a group of students in 2002 when the NAJA games were here. We brought like 20 of us came, and it was such an experience because the students were allowed to basically be production assistants to the APTN people that were the host broadcaster of the NAJA games. And so our students, Inca students, went out and were the assistants on shoots in all the different venues. So that was another really great experience. And then so many Inca students have gotten their start at APTN. So the ones I can think of, I was Delaney Windigo came through Inca. Deb Piapot was, I think, the original marketing and communication director at APTN in the early or the late 90s, early 2000s. You referenced a book. There's a really good book called Original People, Original Television that Jennifer David, who was the communications officer when APTN was established. And if you're interested in the history that led up to that, there's a book called Something New in the Air by Lorna Roth. And that's the TVNC story and the early radio story. And then more recently in 2016, I called Karen and said, we need instructors for our Inca Summer Institute, our crash course training. And so Karen sent, and we do this, our Inca Summer Institute crash course every second year. And so after Karen left, I spoke to Cheryl and she also supported it. So students have had the benefit of working with APTN reporters and producers in the Summer Institute. And they actually are taught in the 2 weeks that we teach them how to do TV as fast as anything. They did stories that were on aptnnews.ca on the website, and a couple of them actually were just absolutely over the moon that they were able to do stories that made it onto the national news. So I'm looking forward to 2024 as our next Summer Institute, and hoping that we'll get APTN's participation again. Appreciate the support of our students, of the industry, of the sector, of really educating Canadians about something so important, and giving people, a vision. Like so many of my students come in and what why are you here? I want to work for APTN. So, yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Shannon. Oh, I just want to say, yeah, thank you, Shannon. She's awesome. I remember when those Inca students came and worked with us for NAG, and it just really increased the amount of coverage that we could do.
I will just add, and the North American Indigenous Games, I mean, that was also another big milestone because it was a live remote. It was quite elaborate. We had these big dome trucks, right? Like the thrill of doing this massive enterprise, something we had never done. Again, I think people were just like, oh my God, are we really going to try this? But we did, and we did it multiple times afterward. I remember the Assembly of First Nations, their national election, it was live on the air when Matthew Kuncum won, and we saw Phil Fontaine walk across the floor. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening, right? And he conceded. Anyway, so that's what I'm reminded of there. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Cheryl. So I like what you shared about the students. Where did she go? Back there. In training. And so, gosh, I think in 1998, when we were doing NAJA student projects, people like Priscilla Wolf was in the project. She also now works for APTN. I just found out that one of her investigative pieces aired last night. She didn't tell me to watch it, but that aired. And then we also had Donna Smith in the project, and she's now with CATV, I think. CTV? Oh, I forgot. And Jonathan Julian, and he's Mi'kmaq, so he's up in Nova Scotia, and he went into powerlifting or something, so left the business. But I remember when APTN was being launched, and the history behind that. First, Aboriginal Voices magazine, and then Aboriginal Voices radio. And a lot of people don't realize how far back Gary Farmer's involvement goes. And people like Bruce Spence, I'm just texting Bruce, I'm like, where the heck are you, man? I come to your hometown and I expect to see you. And so everybody here text Bruce Spence, let's shame him into coming here. Because I want to see him. I haven't seen him for a long time. But we produced a newscast together at the Buffalo Conference, which Cheryl will never tell you, but she won the Poetry Slam contest that year. We remember that. And then there was another one. You went to another conference. So she's a poet, and you didn't know it. but it's great to see the evolution. And when APTN was launching, just thinking about how wonderful that would have been to be in the ground effort, and then to see the evolution. And so congratulations on your anniversary, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Patty. I know, but ever since I got introduced to Patty when I went to that NAJA, now IJA, and I saw Patty and seen her on productions, and I'm just like, wow, Patty Talahongva, she's so awesome, and so really look up to Patty's work also, for sure. Sorry. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Oh no, go ahead.
I'm Shirley Muir. And in 1996, we launched in Winnipeg the Women's Television Network. And I think I was one of the founding executives in those old days. And I just think Winnipeg is such an incredible journalism bed. So I want to congratulate all the folks who created this conference here. It's so fitting that it be here at so many levels. Like, some of the best journalists, I think, in the world have come out of this community. And it's thanks to places like APTN. And I know when we started the Women's Television Network, I remember all the other broadcasters saying, where have all the women gone? Because all the women went to work for WTN, right? And so it was just a very similar kind of experience. I have a question for you, and one is that WTN, I think, is a shadow of its former self, because 8 years in, we got bought off by Chorus Entertainment, and 75 women overnight were fired. So the question is, has anyone offered to buy APTN, and how will you prevent that from happening? And do you have some kind of broadcast relationships that, besides this great mentorship and training and developing that you're doing to send people back out into other newsrooms, are there any other kind of broadcast relationships? We do know that at WTN, when we were all let go, we all scattered all over the place. And one of the great things that WTN did was that for you to sell programming to WTN, you had to be 50% owned, more than 50% owned by a woman. So suddenly all of these small producers were having to hire women and give women ownership roles in all the productions. So there are a lot of women in this country now who can produce, because WTN made that an absolute rule if you wanted to sell anything into WTN. So yeah, so the two questions: anyone tried to buy you, and do you have any other kind of reciprocating broadcasting relationships right now?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, congratulations on the WTN. We still have Donna Harrison in our master control, and she used to work at WTN. But as far as I'm aware, there's no one has ever tried to buy APTN. I have trouble enough trying to get them to buy a subscription. Never mind buy the whole network. There's still something about anything that has the word Aboriginal or Indigenous in it, or when things say, that's not going to make any money, and it's just. They're government funded. Even though we're not government funded, APTN gets the majority of its operating budget from cable subscriptions, and we all know what's happening to cable subscriptions. So that piece still has to work itself out, but steady as she goes for now. And we do have partnerships. I know CTV. We've had ever since. Very, 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 very early on, CTV has been on board and helped launch some our bureaus. They made space for us within their stations. That before, we didn't have to FedEx our tapes around anymore because we got to use their gateway system. We pay for that too, but they helped maintain it, and they welcomed us. They gave us some seed money too. Also, so they've been with us from day one, and so they've been really great. And it's Dan David that actually called all of those networks together for a meeting in those very early days, like 2000, and called them together and said, "You want to partner with APTN?" And CTV is the only one that showed up. And so we remember that for sure. at least I do for sure. But now with our new CEO, she's relatively new. We both we both started our roles around the same time. Monica Ely, she wanted to make sure that we're claiming our space as an Indigenous broadcaster, having our own media and sharing our own voices and not being encroached on by other broadcasters with bigger budgets, wooing away our producers and those big shows, and taking these Indigenous productions and really trying to. I'd go so far as say undercut APTN and try and prevent APTN from doing what our mandate is. And so we do have relatively new MOU with CBC, and that's just to claim our inherent right as an Indigenous broadcaster to occupy our own space. So it's more about programming and sharing like second window to APTN and being aware of the Indigenous productions. And on the news side, we're still developing that protocol for how we're going to work together. So we have not really done anything with CBC News yet. But there is plans, and there's good feelings on both sides. But again, it's about asserting ourselves as an Indigenous broadcaster to maintain our own space. Global, I know one time they called us up recently and said, well, you're sharing you'll probably share it with CTV and you'll probably share it with CBC, which is not true. So why don't you just share it with us too? And so, no, we're not going to do that. Maybe after we air it and after we put it online, we'll share, a little bit of it with you. But I'm just really not appreciating that some are just taking it for granted that, oh yeah, they're here, they'll share with everybody. And, meanwhile, our budgets are going doo, 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 doo. So, so I think, it's just CBC and CTV right now. And also Indian Country Today, we have a very strong relationship with, and we really appreciate that. We have the World Indigenous Television Broadcasters Network, which is Indigenous broadcasters from around the world that we are sharing. We have sharing our footage with, NITV in Australia, Wakata. I can never say their whole name anymore. But it's Maori TV, and I'm sorry I'm not saying the Maori word for that, who are the main people that we're sharing with and collaborating with. So really trying to build that global Indigenous voice to have a say on all these issues, because Canada, operates their mining companies in other parts of the world and treats people very differently. So the Sami, they have fish farms in Canada and Indigenous territories. So there's really a lot of different ideas that we can do, but we're more so about sharing with our Indigenous broadcasters.
Any further questions from anyone? Well, we're a little bit over time, but we started late anyway. So, Rob, you getting up to ask a question there, bud? So I just want to say merci and miigwech to the Indigenous Journalists Association for giving us this time here. Sandra Seidel sitting here, who helped put this panel all together. And of course, Cheryl and Angel and Rick for being part of the panel. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you to our cameraman, Jared.
Jared
Delorme.
Thanks, Jared.
Yes.
Make us look good.